HOA fined me for a messy yard, but code enforcement fined them for hoarding junk cars. Are you fucking kidding me, Mark? Linda's voice cut through the air like a whip, her manicured hand clutching a citation like a sword. Her perfectly pressed blazer barely moved as she jabbed a finger at my chest. This neighborhood has standards, and you, she spat the word like a curse, are dragging us down. I folded my arms, standing my ground. For what exactly? I mowed my damn lawn yesterday. Linda scoffed, flipping through her papers, with the self-righteous fury of a queen about to execute a peasant. Unapproved decorative elements. I blinked. Decorative elements? She thrust the paper into my face. That fucking garden gnome, Mark. That ugly-ass thing, sitting by your walkway. I stared at her, then at the list of violations. Sure enough, unauthorized lawn ornaments were bolded, underlined, and marked with a fine. She's lost her goddamn mind. It's a gnome, Linda. It's a fucking eyesore, she hissed. And don't even get me started on the leaves in your driveway. This isn't some backwoods trailer park. I felt my jaw clench. You're fining me for leaves? Her lips curled into a smirk. Do you think this is funny? We have rules, and people like you. Her eyes flickered over my work boots and flannel. Don't get to fucking ignore them. My fingers curled into a fist. Not worth it. Not yet. I let out a slow breath, then glanced over her shoulder, where 3 rusting, busted-up cars sat like forgotten tombstones in her driveway. I'd seen them before, but suddenly, they meant something more. I forced myself to smirk. Right. I'll get rid of the gnome. Her eyes narrowed. And the leaves. I nodded. And the leaves. I turned on my heel, walking away. But I didn't go inside. Instead, I pulled out my phone. Because if Linda wanted to play dirty, I was about to bury her in her fucking mess. I didn't wait. The second I got inside, I opened my laptop and pulled up the county's municipal code enforcement site. There it is. Abandoned vehicles, excessive debris, non-operational machinery, all are clear violations. I snapped a few high-resolution photos of Linda's junkyard collection from my upstairs window. 3 rusting hulks, tires deflated, one with a shattered windshield. Another had a damn E growing through the undercarriage. And this bee is worried about a gnome. But I wasn't dumb. I didn't fire my shot right away. Instead, I played it cool. I pretended to be a compliant little resident. The next morning, I stood on my lawn, holding the stupid garden gnome in one hand and a trash bag in the other. Linda was casually walking her pristine little lapdog by my house, eyes locked on me like a damn prison warden. I made a show of tossing the gnome into the trash. Her smirk was instant. Think she won. Then, I grabbed a rake and very slowly started clearing up the offensive leaves, making sure she saw every exaggerated motion. Her smirk deepened. That's when I knew this wasn't about leaves. It wasn't even about the HOA. This was about control. I didn't say a word. I just nodded at her, the kind of nod that says, enjoy this while you can. I should have known she wouldn't stop. By the end of the week, I had 3 more citations in my mailbox. Pure, unfiltered, grade A bulls. I kept my cool, but I documented everything. I took photos, saved emails, and even recorded a phone call when I asked for clarification. We're just enforcing the rules, Mark, Linda said, her voice dripping with fake politeness. You wouldn't want to be known as the neighbor who can't follow simple instructions, would you? I gripped my phone so tight I thought it might snap in half. Then she added, almost as an afterthought, oh, and just a friendly reminder, we vote on lawn variance approvals next month. It'd be a real shame if your request got denied. That was it. That was her endgame. She wanted me to fold, to obey. But I don't fold. I started watching more closely, paying attention to which neighbors got fined, and which didn't. Old Mrs. Thompson had an overgrown hedge that crept halfway across the sidewalk. No violation. Todd, from 3 doors down, had an old boat parked in his driveway for months. No fine. Hell, Linda's own best friend had a backyard so cluttered it looked like an abandoned flea market. No complaints. I ran a quick search through the HOA's publicly available records. Patterns emerged fast. Out of 14 citations issued in the last 6 months, 11 went to newer residents, people who weren't in Linda's little circle. I scrolled back further. Same trend. Linda wasn't enforcing rules. She was weaponizing them. I took a deep breath. No more waiting. I submitted my complaint to code enforcement that night. Anonymous. Thorough. And now I waited for her to get a taste of her own goddamn medicine. It didn't take long. Just 3 days later, I got a call from a blocked number. You think you're smart? Linda's voice was a low growl. Her mask of HOA politeness completely shattered. You little fucking snitch. I grinned. I have no idea what you're talking about, Linda. Oh, cut the S. Code enforcement was just here. You thought you could pull a fast one on me? I kept my voice light. So, they found a problem? Silence. Then a furious exhale. This isn't over. And she wasn't lying. The next day, I got hit with 2 more violations. One for my grass being 0.5 inches over regulation height. One for unapproved exterior modifications. It was pathetic. Transparent retaliation. But here's where Linda fucked up. She'd pushed too hard, too fast. Neighbors started noticing. At first, it was just murmurs. I overheard Mrs. Thompson talking to another neighbor on her porch. I don't see why Mark's getting all these citations when half the street has violations. Then Todd, the boat guy, stopped me at the mailbox. Hey man, did you get fined for your porch light? I nodded. He let out a low whistle. Jesus. That's fucking ridiculous. By the end of the week, I had 4 different neighbors quietly asking about my situation. And the best part? They all had their own stories. Mrs. Patel had been forced to repaint her fence, while Linda's best friends were Ting. Jeremy from across the street had been denied a patio permit, while another HOA buddy got theirs approved without review. Piece by piece, the narrative was shifting. Linda's reign wasn't as untouchable as she thought, and I hadn't even played my ace yet. Linda must have let the change in the air because she went nuclear. I came home one evening to a formal final notice taped to my door. She thought she had me cornered, but she didn't know something critical. Earlier that same day, I got an official call from code enforcement. They weren't just citing her. They were launching an investigation into the HOA itself. And now, all I had to do was sit back and watch the fireworks. Linda didn't waste any time. The next morning, I woke up to find a bright orange notice zip-tied to my front door. Below it, a fat stack of new fines, totaling over $1,200. I laughed. She's losing it. Then my phone rang. Unknown number. I picked up. Mark. You stupid son. Linda didn't even try to hide her rage this time. You think you're clever? Think you can pull some sneaky little fucking stunt and get away with it? I run this neighborhood. I run this HOA. And you, I could practically hear her spit flying, are about to learn just how much fucking power I have. I let the silence hang for a moment. Then I said, real calm, you're scared. Excuse me? You're fucking scared, Linda. I leaned back, grinning. Code enforcement is breathing down your neck. The neighbors are talking, and now you're scrambling. Pathetic. A pause. Then she hissed. You have no idea what you've started. She hung up. 5 minutes later, my water got shut off. I checked the city records. No outage. No scheduled maintenance. That called in a fraudulent report. This was war. I didn't even have to do anything. Linda's temper did the work for me. By the end of the day, everyone in the neighborhood knew about my fines. But something shifted. It wasn't whispers anymore. It was open conversations. Todd, the boat guy, walked right up to me while I was in my driveway. Hey man, I just got a fine for excessive driveway staining. For an oil spill that's been there for fucking years. Think that's a coincidence. A few houses down, Mrs. Patel was standing with her arms crossed, glaring at Linda's place. Then it happened. A group of neighbors showed up at my door. Mrs. Thompson, Todd, Jeremy, a few others. They weren't whispering anymore. We need to talk, Mrs. Thompson said. I let them in. And then, they started telling their stories. One by one, they all had something: unfair denials, fines that made no sense, selective enforcement. Linda had been pulling this for years. And now, they were finally pissed off enough to do something about it. I didn't wait. That night, I printed every single piece of evidence I had. The fines, the emails, screenshots of my yard before and after citations, and of course, The code enforcement complaints. The neighbors? They started digging too. Mrs. Patel found past HOA financial records. Jeremy pulled meeting transcripts. Todd, he found an old newspaper article. Turns out, Linda had been kicked off a previous HOA board for fraudulent fines and embezzlement. We had her. But I wanted one last move. I filed a formal lawsuit against the HOA. Not small claims. Full-on legal action. Linda thought she could drown me in fines? She had no fucking idea what was coming. The next HOA meeting? It was going to be the beginning of her end. And I was going to enjoy every second of it. The HOA meeting was held in the community clubhouse, a beige, soulless building that smelled like stale coffee and old carpet. By the time I got there, the room was packed. More people than I'd ever seen show up for one of these dull-A eatings. Linda stood at the front of the room, her usual smug expression in place. But there was something underneath it now, tension. She knew something was up. I took my time walking in, locking eyes with her as I made my way to the front. I didn't sit. I just stood there, arms crossed. Her voice came over the microphone, smooth but tight. Before we begin, I want to remind everyone that this meeting is for official HOA business only. Unfounded complaints and personal grievances will not be tolerated. I smirked. Oh, she's nervous. Good. I turned, looking at the crowd. Before we start, I said loudly, making sure my voice carried, I just want to thank everyone for coming. It's great to see the community getting involved. Because, you know, if we're all going to follow the rules, we should probably make sure they apply to everyone. A few murmurs. Linda's eyes narrowed. Let's get this over with, she snapped. We have a full agenda tonight. I pulled a folder from my bag and slapped it down on the table. Great, I said. Then let's talk about this. I flipped open the folder, pulling out printed photos of Linda's property. The junk cars. The debris. The absolute rash heap in her backyard. This, I said, holding up a photo, is Linda's yard. Silence. Then, a single voice from the back. Holy yes. Linda's face went sheet white. This is out of order. Oh, I don't think so. I cut her off. See, Linda here has been fining people for things like gnomes and leaves while her property looks like a damn scrapyard. More murmurs. Someone whispered, fucking hypocrite. I stepped forward, dropping another set of papers onto the table. Here are the code enforcement reports. Turns out that leaving rotting vehicles in your driveway is an actual violation. And fun fact, it carries a way bigger fine than an unapproved mailbox color. Linda's mouth opened, closed, and opened again. You abused your position. My voice cut through the room like a blade. You weaponized HOA rules against people you didn't like. But the second the actual law gets involved, now you want to cry foul. Linda turned to the board members. Are you seriously going to let him hijack this meeting with his bulls? The board members didn't speak, but they looked at her. At the photos, the neighbors in the crowd were no longer quiet. She felt the shift, and that's when she realized. She wasn't in control anymore. The HOA president, a guy named Greg, who had mostly been Linda's spineless yes-man, cleared his throat. This is serious, he muttered, flipping through the documents. Linda spun on him. You're not buying this bulls, are you? He's just trying to. Greg held up a hand. Linda, sit down. The entire room went dead silent. Linda rose. It was like watching a predator Lisa. It's not the apex anymore. I leaned in. Checkmate. She turned back to me, seething. Do you think this means anything? Do you think they're just going to side with you? I didn't have to answer, because someone else did. We demand a vote. Mrs. Patel's voice rang out, effective immediately. Linda should be removed from the board. A ripple of agreement surged through the room. People nodded, muttered, and clapped. Linda looked around, panicking now. You can't just. Jeremy stood. Why the hell not? You've been using this HOA as your little kingdom for years. You fine us for everything, but you ignore your violations? Nah, fucking that. Todd crossed his arms. I second the motion to remove her. Greg hesitated. He looked at Linda, then back to the crowd, then finally at me. He sighed. All in favor? Hands shot up. Nearly the whole damn room. Linda's face twisted in a mask of fury and disbelief. You can't do this. Greg didn't even look at her. "You're out, Linda." Silence. Then applause. I watched as Linda stumbled back, her face red, her hands clenched into fists. Her empire had just collapsed in real time, and I enjoyed every goddamn second of it. Linda stood there, shaking, her whole world crumbling around her. I could see the exact moment it hit her. The HOA wasn't a kingdom anymore. The room, her once loyal subjects, weren't looking at her with respect or fear. They were watching a loser get dethroned. Greg exhaled, rubbing his temples. Effective immediately, Linda is removed from her position. A temporary vote will be held for an interim president. Linda snapped. She shrieked, slamming a fist on the table. "I built this HOA." You built nothing." I cut in, stepping forward. "You milked power until it strangled you." Her eyes locked onto mine, her breath ragged. Pure hate. I could tell she wanted to say more, to claw back control. But it was over. Greg turned to the crowd. "We'll handle leadership elections next week. For now," I motioned that all fines issued under Linda's leadership for non-substantial violations be voided pending review. Cheers erupted. The HOA's reign of terror? Done. Linda? Gone. And me? I was just getting started. I expected Linda to go out kicking and screaming. Instead, she went out pathetic. The next morning, I saw her standing in her yard, staring at her rusting junkyard of cars, while 2 county enforcement officers walked up her driveway. The notice they handed her? A formal citation. Fines totaling over $5,000. It was beautiful. I didn't say a word as I walked to my truck, sipping my coffee. I didn't need to. She knew exactly who was responsible. By the time I got back home that evening, one of her cars was towed. A moving truck sat in her driveway. Linda wasn't just fined. She was getting the F out. A week later, the community elected a new HOA president, Mrs. Patel. What is the first order of business? Reform the HOA. Second order of business? Making sure HOA rules applied to everyone, including former board members. Todd, Jeremy, Mrs. Thompson, the people who were once scared to speak up. Now, they were the loudest voices in the room. And me. I finally got to enjoy my damn lawn in peace. The best part, the HOA became functional. There will be no more bulls fines. No more hour-hungry dictators. No more eponized citations. Linda. She vanished. Last I heard, she tried pulling the same in another neighborhood and got shut down within a month. She underestimated me. She underestimated all of us. The next time I walked through the neighborhood, Todd grinned at me from his driveway. "Still got that gnome?" I smirked. "Damn right I do." Justice wasn't just served. It was fucking legendary.